right there on the front cover. Yes, you've guessed it, Rush. it was really, and you know, this is what reminded me, because when you contacted me a short while ago and you said, you know, that there was a similarity between Rush and yourselves, and I thought, wow, it just goes on and on, you know.
Never ends.
Sort of, that was really, and then there was another magazine, I can't recall which one, I think it may have been another issue of Classic Rock, or no, I know what it was. It was let me think, it wasn't the first issue of Classic Rock Presents Prog, which we were in. I think it was either issue 2 or issue 3. That's right, it was issue 3, because issue 1, we had a track off our new album, which I'll just talk to you about in a moment, but and the same thing with issue 2. But with issue 3, where we had a review, a really great review of our new album, Audio Verite, which was done by another guy called Mick Wall, who's also quite a well-known writer. He does prog stuff, and he also writes about Guns N' Roses and people like that, so he does the hard rock stuff as well. And on the front cover, would you believe, yes, you've guessed it, Rush again.
It's fate.
So this is
Destiny.
Now about 4 or 5 coincidences. It's almost as if our life is slightly entwined with Messrs. Lee, Lifeson, and Peart in some respects.
I'm just curious, you personally, I mean, you said you dig them and they're you know, you appreciate them, but who would you say personally is your favorite band that influenced you the most, if not them?
Well, Rush are a band definitely, you know, that I've liked enormously over the years. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I mean, I love the what I call the classic period of Rush, and what I think a lot of other Rush fans might also call the classic period of Rush, which is the sort of you know, kind of 2112 on through Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, and particularly Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures. I mean, they were at such a peak during that period, and Signals is also great. They've had great moments since then, and I mean, to be honest, Snakes and Arrows, I thought just completely blew my head off when I heard it. I thought, at last, you know, everything comes to those who wait long enough. Do you know what I mean?
Back to basics.
It really was such a great album. But I mean, I mentioned Cream earlier. I mean, obviously, if you listen to some of the songwriting that I do, it is quite structured, with not just 70s classic rock, you know, Rush era stuff, but it's also sort of, you know, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, those sorts of the classic heavy rock bands, but also some of the more, I suppose these days, some people might even call them sort of pop orientated, but I still think they've got, you know, they were great, and those are sort of the Beatles, the Stones, you know, the classic 3 and 4 minute kind of pop song and rock and roll songwriting. But what I like about you know, growing up listening to Rush, and of course Yes and Genesis and King Crimson and some lesser known groups, then they're quite well known in England, and there's a contingent of American people that really dig them, but maybe some of your listeners may or may not know them, but slightly lesser known bands like Family and Caravan and Wishbone Ash and people like that, and Supertramp I think made it quite big in the States at one point. But you know, those people that were slightly on the periphery, I've listened to them all. I like them all in different ways. But what I like to do with Treat stuff is I like to take some of those wonderful prog elements and then but incorporate them into, you know, if the Beatles were a prog rock band, you know, or they were producing Rush, you know, it kind of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of, rather than, and to be honest, even Rush, I think themselves admitted that maybe they got a little bit too lengthy on some of the pieces, and when they trimmed it down back to Spirit of Radio and Free Will and, you know, Tom Sawyer, and when they took those 18-minute concepts and then absolutely
stripped them down,
you know, made them lean and mean. I think that is the best way I can think of describing it. Right. And they said, you know, listen guys, let's not spend 18 minutes. Let's absolutely say what we want to say within 5 or 6 minutes. Let's see if we can do it, you know. And that is one of the things, to be honest with you, that you know, we do try to actively do. You know, I certainly do as the guy writing most of the material, but even when we're working up the arrangements, we do try to keep it within a certain. That doesn't mean to say it has to be a certain length. Okay, if something goes a little bit longer, so be it. If it's a little bit shorter, so be it. But one of the guys in England who plays us quite a bit in one of the British internet stations, who does some of the prog stuff, he loves the Phonography album, the second one we did, because there are songs on it like Clutching at Jagged Glass, which has lots of time signatures and changes in tempi and so on, but the whole thing only lasts about, I think, 4 minutes, 20 seconds, something like that, you know. And so he says, he always introduces and says, one of the shortest progressive rock songs, you know. So that's maybe where we're a little bit different from a lot of the other kind of contemporary progressive rock bands that maybe are out there at the moment.
Right. I think it's putting, I get the point, trying to, in a way, it's you have an influence which says, how do you make a very concise and clean and beautiful statement in the 3 or 4 minute formula, and then you have all this artistic influence. It's almost like an artistic, not a kind of a mashup of your influences. One is the well crafted, quick statement. The other is the elaborate exploration of every kind of musical element. How do you join them?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's I mean, you do have to. It can become quite a minefield, and you do have to kind of seek your way sort of through it. But there are people that like Rush that do work at it, and I mean, Tom Sawyer, which is a great groove, and it's one of my all-time favorite Rush songs. Apparently it took them ages. So I've heard. To get the groove and get it sounding, and yet when you hear it on the record, and even when you see them play it live, and I've seen them live a number of times, and they just get better and better, to be honest, that band live. It's sort of, you kind of think, they must have just walked into the studio and just got it in one take, and of course they didn't. They really worked and worked and worked at it, but it was, this is what it's, I mean, it's sort of, as they say, it's 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration, isn't it, to get the things right. But I mean, as I say, there are those similarities between ourselves and Rush, but then what I like to think of, which makes hopefully to your listeners who may be interested in us, what makes us hopefully unusual, especially for this particular era, is that we do use, especially on our new album, Audio Verity Deceptive Blends, we had so much material because so much experimenting went on over from 2005 onwards, as I mentioned earlier. I knew very early on it was going to be a double album, and then what we said was, with the previous album, Phonography, we had quite a few different genres of things going on, but we sort of, one fast song, one slow song, one slightly different, and then on this one we said, because it's a double album, let's theme it out, let's make it like a traditional vinyl album, like something, Zeppelin would have done, or Rush did, in their heyday, with a gatefold sleeve and all the rest of it, although we were doing it with a CD format, but it amounted to the same thing. So we said, imagine 2 CDs, and each CD is replacing a vinyl album. So you've got 2 halves on each CD, if you follow me.
Right. And
so we did it like that, and we said a hard rock side, and then we had an acoustic side, and then we had an experimental side, and then we had an electric side. And then it all flowed out. And what we did was what we like to do is we do like to use quite a few different genres, like progressive rock, like a little bit of psychedelia, and little kind of folk leanings, which of course Rush had as well. I mentioned Rivendell earlier. Right. But we also like to use little elements of kind of maybe jazz as well, and the occasional bit of, certainly blues, of course, which is the heart of rock music, and maybe a little bit of country. And really, I know it sounds like, oh my God, it must be directionless. It isn't. If you listen to the music and check it out, there is a thread that runs all the way through it. And we also like to use lots of different types of exotic instruments.
Yeah, I noticed that in your even on your MySpace page, in the listing of instruments, is that there's nothing there in common with Rush. I mean, they're very cookie cutter. I don't know what the bass clarinet, the winds.
Indeed, yes, there's lots and lots of things. But I mean, even with Rush, there was a point, maybe not so much now, but during their Farewell to Kings, Xanadu, all that, that whole Level Estrangiato, all that period, where, Neil Peart was using glockenspiel and lots of different percussion instruments and so on. And it's interesting. Hopefully your listeners will, be interested. When we were doing the Audio Verite Deceptive Blends album, there was I detuned one of my 12-string guitars into a sitar tuning, because although I can play the sitar a little bit, I can play the guitar a lot better. So I kind of slightly cheated and put the 12-string guitar into a sitar tuning. And so here I was kind of working this track out, which turned out to be Citizen of the World, which was the first track that the Classic Rock Presents Prog wanted on their CD cover mount, and which we got quite a bit of publicity for. And we got emails from quite a few people in the United States, actually, that really picked up on the song and kind of said, we really like this, and blah, blah, blah. I got lots of emails, which I do respond to, and the other guys in the band respond to, so do please send us emails if any of your listeners are interested in learning more about us.
What's your email address?
It's the treatband at yahoo.co.uk, I think.
Yep, I just checked my email. Great.
But I think it is, but just check on the website. Just go to the treat.co.uk, and it should be mailing list section there, and then it'll get to us. But anyway, at that point when I worked this out, I said to Dom Lash, who's the bass player in the Treat, I said, I think we need to get in a slightly different kind of percussionist, and we were at that time sort of changing drummers, shall we say, and this guy burst on the scene. He lived just like a mile and a half down the road from me, and I'd never our paths had never crossed. And he played tablas, and he's originally from Scotland. He's a guy called Dave Hart. And he came in, we rehearsed in his front room one afternoon, plumbed all the way through it. And I think a week later we were in the studio recording Citizen of the World, which is one of the highlight tracks, and one of the tracks that we've been compared to Rush, because it starts off all acoustic and has different time signatures, and then it goes into a sort of great finale hard rock kind of section. And he was originally just drafted in to play tablas, on one track. And then he said, in conversation, he said, I can play bass clarinet, I can do that. Right, okay, well, we'll have you back in. And we called him back in so many times, can you play this? Oh, yes, I can play this. Oh, can you play that? Yes, I can play that.
Yeah.
And so we said, listen, you're in the band, and since then it flowed. He's on the new album. Dave plays timpani on a couple of tracks. He plays glockenspiel. He plays bass clarinet. He plays didgeridoo. He plays I can't even remember half that. And on the next album, which is going to be coming out hopefully in due course, he plays even more instruments. He plays accordion, piano accordion, and flute, although he's playing flute on this one as well, but he plays flute on the next one. He plays saxophone and so on. So I'm kind of taking charge of all most of the string instruments, like 6 and 12 string acoustic guitars, electric, 6 and 12 string electric, and doing a bit of sitar, a little bit of banjo I get to play on this latest record of ours, and a bit of mandolin, kind of slightly folkier instruments, classical guitar. Alex Lifeson, of course, is an influence there again, because he plays classical or used to play quite a bit of classical guitar, especially around the time I'm thinking of Farewell to Kings era Rush, and of course people from an earlier age, Steve Hackett from Genesis.
Seemed to be it was a big thing in the 70s, kind of a crossover.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, all those people, including Rush, they were such great players. They made such great, timeless, long-lasting rock music. It really, I mean, I'd argue that point with anybody, anytime, anywhere, and have, growing up with those people, and they've continued. I mean, it's people like that have inspired me to kind of, because all this is very time-consuming and it requires a lot of time and energy and finance and all the rest of it, and so, you have to be, I think if I was starting out now and I had, I won't be cruel enough to mention any names, but, I had to listen to, let's say, the current top 40 AM radio music scene wherever in the United